Hi, Monica.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
How about you?
I'm good. I just spoke with Dante.
Me too.
Nice. We're on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, but I think you have a better handle of this meeting, as we were just talking about the CAT meeting from this morning. So
Oh, okay. How was that?
that was actually had a dramatic ending because we ended up losing quorum at the very end of the meeting when we were trying to vote on an item. So
Wow.
we couldn't quite finish that up. Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, because a member, like her internet connection was just lost. She didn't mean to leave the meeting, and like it's her turn to vote, and we just lost her. And then we realized we didn't have a quorum. So that was kind of,
My gosh.
unexpected. Yeah.
Man, the ripple effects, all these different things that we don't expect will be issues.
Yeah.
Huh. So right, it's just, is it open at this point for whoever, or is there a waiting room?
It should be open for everyone.
Okay.
I know Lynn Mackey couldn't be here, but she sent in representative. So, but I don't know if this person will participate. We'll see. Hopefully, yes.
Hi there.
Hello.
I see Ronell is here. Hi, Ronell.
Hi, Renelle.
And Jeff, I do have to step away for a little while at 3:30. I have just
Okay.
a quick phone appointment. So I'll still be on the line, but then at that time I may not be able to facilitate. But I think you know more than I do about this meeting anyway, so you can just take the lead on that.
All right, fair enough. I'll try to muddle through somehow.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Monica. Hi, Chris. Hi, Tammy.
Hello.
And it's Nick. Hi, Nick.
Yes, Nick Berger from the county office.
Oh, what was that?
Yes, Nick Berger from the county office of education.
Oh, great. Glad you're here.
I'm going to be on mute because there's a lot of construction happening.
No problem. How's everybody doing? Tammy, Chris, how you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I just had a nice lunch, so my tummy is happy and full, and here I am with you all, and so I'm doing great.
There you go. You got the energy you need for the meeting.
Yes.
Did you just have a nice lunch? Like just had it?
Yeah, I literally just left I drove from Benicia to Martinez, but yeah, I was sitting and having a fantastic lunch. So yeah.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, I know how
Jill.
I
Hi there.
do the intermittent fasting thing. So sometimes if I if I get too caught up with work, it'll be like 2 or 3 by the time I'm eating for the first time. And hopefully,
Yeah, I've been hearing about that in different spaces, this intermittent fasting.
I think it works. You limit your eating to like an 8-hour block in the day.
That's cool. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Jeff.
We're still having a few folks trickle in, of course, and my thought was that we would just have maybe the first 5 minutes from 3 to 3:05, just allow people to log on, and then we could begin our agenda then.
Okay.
Sounds
So
good.
I'm gonna stop my video, but I'm listening. I just need to. I'll be right back.
No problem.
Yes, and Jeff Marcus is representing Lynn Mackey, so he can count towards quorum. And I think we do have a quorum, including Tammy. When she comes back, we can get started.
Great.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Renell.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and you?
Good. Making it happen on this afternoon right here.
Excellent.
Yep.
Right, and as we're all just trickling in, maybe I'll invite folks to review the agenda. If you don't yet have it in front of you, this is a good time to try to pull up and invite others to join. You got a couple of minutes here. Text a friend, have them join also.
Can a link to the agenda be placed in the chat?
Yes, let me do that now. Sometimes it's just a question of which page. There we go. Okay, so that's where I go to try to navigate. I also get email that I think I just set myself up for an auto alert, but you can also navigate to our specific subcommittee there. If that's not working, let me know. I know that I just downloaded from my email, but it's right. It's sometimes good to just take the second to allow for that. What else was I going to say here? Right. To review the agenda, invite others to join. I'll invite folks, if you wish, feel comfortable to, you can rename and add your pronouns. That's something that I'm becoming more and more, I think, enlightened to, or it's coming to my mind. I don't want me to be preachy about it, but I guess I'd also say more awareness on my end. And I'll just, to make that explicit for folks, it's kind of a trans and gender identity awareness thing that is becoming more and more kind of apparent to me in different spaces. So I invite that. And then also, we still have maybe another couple minutes here, just as I see we got 9 folks, to breathe, right, as we have these spaces. It's good. So yeah. Monica, we do have quorum, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, having said all that, let me introduce myself and just make sure everyone is in the right place where you're expecting to be, right? This is Racial Justice Oversight Body Subcommittee, Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee. And I'm Jeff Landau. I'm sitting here, or I'm participating as chair of the subcommittee and as a member, steering committee member of the Contra Costa County Racial Justice Coalition. I know there's some overlap in name there, so just make part of that clear is that the coalition is a group of, or a coalition of individuals, organizations. It is not a government org, but people coming together for local reform, and I've been with that group. I'm also a public defender in the county, although I'm not here wearing that hat. That's how I became as interested and invested in racial justice reform issues. We came through that lens as being a public defender here in Contra Costa. I see that we have another person joining, and we're just beginning with a little intro orientation. We'll be coming to public comment soon, so you haven't missed it. And we'll also be, I think, going around informally and introducing ourselves, what hasn't yet happened, but I'll just say to the new person who's joined, Jeff Landau with the Racial Justice Coalition. So I did send a link in the chat that also will allow you to go through the agenda, but if you do go there, you can see a little bit of the history of how we got here and what this organization is, because I know sometimes people are coming, I think, well, maybe with the exception, I don't know if I do know, I'm familiar with the person ending number 1352, but perhaps everyone else has some familiarity with this space, but it doesn't hurt to kind of just go through the history. And welcome to the, I see someone else who's joined. At that link, you can see that in 2016, there was a first iteration of this group. This is the Racial Justice Oversight Body, but before that was a Racial Justice Task Force. And I don't need to read aloud to you, but basically just say that there was a hammering out over time. There was a collaborative process that worked out recommendations from community members and government org representatives, specifically related to racial disparities, racial injustice in various forms of government systems, made recommendations, and here we are now in the second phase for the oversight body, which is about implementation. We talked about what we recommended, phase one, we meaning the task force, even though I didn't sit on that, the people participating in this process. And now that we're in this second phase, it's about let's try some of these things and put them into action and see what happens. And then as we continue, as you see on that site, the next phases after that will be assessment and seeing, is this working? And if it is, let's do more of it. And if not, maybe why not? And let's try something else if necessary. So that's just a little bit of background about what this group is, who we are in terms of basically just the composition of this thing and what's the authority of the group and what's our mission, our mandate. And I also wanted, just before we go around and introduce ourselves briefly, to point to the attachment to the agenda, to this week's agenda. And you'll see on its page, let's see, starting at page 4 of 17, you see 4, 5, and 6. I am including that it's a little snippet from the proposed budget from this last year. And I'm not including it for the purposes of talking about budget, really. It's just as a little bit of a structure overview, which I think sometimes can be helpful when kind of getting a sense of where did you guys come from? Like you, this Racial Justice Oversight Body, and the Board of Supervisors is what exactly, and who's elected, and how did they get to this other thing? So this is a kind of a broad overview, if you look at that, of basically the organizational chart, and I'll just highlight that the positions there that you see on page 4, if you are there, is those that are in bold are elected positions, and then the ones that are not are otherwise, appointed or just through promotion in those different positions. And then you can kind of see as you go down the next page, there are standing committees. And I think that sometimes can be helpful for folks that are coming into spaces and wanting to know, I have an issue, I want this to be addressed. And where might be appropriate different spaces. You can see that there's, for example, often relevant in our sort of discussions, Public Protection Committee. But in addition to that, there are a number of different ones that might be relevant for people. For example, internal operations, legislation, family and human services, etc. So just putting that out there in terms of seeing who are the different players and how does this all kind of fit together. Hopefully that is useful for some folks here.
Jeff,
yeah, please.
can I just ask just point one thing out on here. I think that's awesome. Number one, that you included all this. I wish every advisory body did this to understand, so people could kind of understand the structure. The only thing I want to point out, and I know you just took this document, but it says county administrator, looks like it's in bold, which you would think he's elected, but he's not. He's appointed by the Board of Supervisors, just to clarify that one piece.
That is good. Thank you, Jill. I appreciate that feedback and also that clarification, or I guess it's correction, because it does look to me like it's also in bold. So yes, right. So with that, if there are, recommendations that you may have, you as different members here joining and you think would be helpful, or just as you're thinking on this, receiving the info, questions about it, or something else that would be helpful to kind of take away some of the lack of clarity, because there is a lot to wade your way through. Okay, so with that, let me invite others to introduce themselves. And my plan here, I'm trying to be as explicit as possible in facilitation with expectations and things. So I will propose that I'm going to hand off to one person, ask that next person to introduce themselves really briefly, because we're going to talk content together. And if there are points that you want to raise, we're nearly at public comment. So this is really just my name is, my organization, and kind of identifying so that when we can interact with each other, we know who each other are, and then we'll be able to make comment and public comment. And I'll also invite, after I introduce the next person, for them to introduce or just hand off to the next person, because we kind of have to be able to do that in rooms like these. So Jeff Landau, and if I can hand off to Nick Berger.
Thank you, Jeff. So my name is Nick Berger. I'm the Senior Director of Student Programs for the County Office of Education. Just getting started with my position. So thank you for having me.
Welcome.
And I will give it to Mr. Greg.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg Clementally, a member of the public, active with Defund the Conquer Police Department and Surge.
Welcome.
And how about Tammy?
Thanks, Greg. So yes, Tammy here. I am representing the community, Contra Costa. Passing it onward to Ronell.
Yeah, good afternoon. Ronell Ellis. I'm with Health Right 360, Reentry Network, to be specific. Central to East County, we take care of, and we provide services and resources to all individuals upon release from several facilities, but mainly our county jails here, and CDC and even federal institutions, depending on the status of the person once released. And we basically make sure that they don't recidivate. That's our goal, and to annihilate and eliminate recidivism. So that's what we aim to do, and that's what we work towards. And I'll hand it off to Miss Monica.
Thanks, Ronell.
Yes, I'm Monica Carlisle. I'm the Senior Program Analyst with the Office of Reentry and Justice. We were under the CEO's office. Now we've transferred to the Probation Department. And we facilitate all the meetings for the Racial Justice Oversight Body and its subcommittees.
Thanks, Monica. Handoff?
Oh, sorry, I lost
No problem.
track who spoken. Did Chris get a chance? I'm sorry.
Not yet.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris James. I'm a site manager with the W. Haywood Burns Institute, national nonprofit in Oakland, based around transformation of justice systems in terms of race, equity, and structural well-being. And I will pass to Marcus.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Marcus Walton. I'm the Director of Communications and Special Projects with the County Office of Education. Also, just getting started in the position, but in a previous role in the county, did serve on the Racial Justice Task Force a couple of years back. So back to this work. And I will pass it off to, I believe, Meg Healy. Have you presented?
No. Hi, I'm a community member and a member of Surge.
Hi, Meg. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're just handing off. Let me like transition to
Oh,
Jill.
yes,
if I
I'm
may.
sorry.
Yeah.
Jill.
Hi there, Jill Ray with Supervisor Candace Anderson's office, and I'm going to hand it off to the phone caller. This ends in 1352.
Thanks, Jill. For those on video, your square is lit, so we can hear barely, but just very faintly. And well, you're welcome to chime in if it's a connection question. And right, floor is open to you because we'd love to be able to have you join in the conversation when you're able.
My name is Edward.
Of course.
Edward Williams, and I'm a member of the Racial Justice Oversight Body.
Hi, Edward. Glad you're with us.
Hi. Okay.
Right. So yes, another member of our quorum, and filling out our subcommittee. We're at the point of the agenda, having done our welcome and orientation for public comment. I will just set out here before we begin that I want to have aspirational, not rigid timeline, basically just in the interest of really doing honor to the things that we have on agenda from last time and wanting to put in that time and energy to those things. And if we allow ourselves kind of through budgeting that the meeting, we should be able to hit all the things we want to. So with that in mind, I'm going to gently propose that for public comment, that people keep theirs to 2 minutes. It's not as rigid as I think, especially with a small group like this, but just so that we can have a robust conversation in the other portions. And right, I would also say to that, especially having had the experience sometimes of having limited opportunity to be at a meeting, wanting to be able to make my point on something or experience that with others, and try to avoid as much as possible sort of rigid portions of a meeting. And that's a long way of saying, we say there that for public comment on issues that are not later already on the agenda, I'll say that I think it's fair to have a little bit of an exception to that. If you're not able to be present for the conversation later and you want to have your contribution, I think it's fine to do so with really the understanding, respect for everyone else here, to not be repeating the same content later. But if you feel like, I want to be able to say this and I can't be here later for the thing that's on the agenda, then I welcome your contribution on that now too. So hopefully that's fair enough. And saying that, I'll open the floor to anyone here if they'd like to speak on any item. So we're at public comment time. I leave these little spaces. I also sometimes have been frustrated as a member of the public where it's like, oh, hearing nothing, and we just move. Wait a second, I was thinking about whether I was going to say something. I was building up my kind of intention. Let's see if it happens. So give a few seconds for folks. All right, well, there's giving time and then it's becoming an awkward pause. So there's that fine balance. Let's just say that that was an opportunity for public comment, and we can also be open with comments as we get to agenda items, not feeling like, well, this is off topic. So long as you're contributing to the conversation, I think we can all move forward like that. So, plus my expected timeline just got a major bonus there with our public comment period. I expected a little bit more of a window, so that's good. It'll allow us more time to talk on the other items on the agenda. Well, I'll frame it as the positive. At least I'm saying it is good. Okay. Next item, if we're looking at the agenda, is number 3, record of actions. So this is just going over what we did last time. I keep giving my narrative on like my experience as being a community member going to meetings. I would often say I found this part frustrating of like, well, documenting what did we do before. It's like, let's just talk about what we're going to do now, right? Like we don't go over the meetings from before, but it can be important because as we move ahead and we forgot, didn't we already do this? Or what did people actually say? So it's useful to make sure it's all clear because we put a lot of time in each of these ones each time, right? To make sure that we say things with intention and we prepare for it. So I want to make sure it doesn't get lost. Okay. So our meeting minutes, or our record of actions, I should say, begins page 7 of 17 of the agenda packet. I'll do a little check-in to say I threw that link in the chat that should be able to allow you to navigate to the agenda. I would also say if you got the Zoom link, perhaps that same message has the attachment. Those are likely coming in the same place, but not always. So is anyone having difficulty accessing the agenda? Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't have that. I'm on the phone.
Well, that makes sense. Edward, maybe
Yeah.
just for, purposes of making it clear, it's a small enough a group. Why don't I just read aloud the agenda real quickly so that you are able to hear what we're going to be covering?
Okay.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Of course. So we've already covered welcome and new attendee orientation. That was item 1. We also covered number 2, public comment, which was brief, if any. Now we're at number 3, which is record of actions. After this, number 4 is the youth-led community listening session or sessions update. Number 5, going through our work plan with a focus on the the capacity fund. Number 6, future meeting scheduling, usually pretty brief. And number 7, announcements and adjourn. And you could broadly construe announcements and think, isn't that another opportunity for public comment? Well, I think the reasonable minds could agree there or differ. Let's just move ahead and say that's the lineup. And right now we're going through the minutes from before, which I'll say I didn't notice anything that was in need of change, but I'll also try to be as as transparent and frank as I can, but this is trying to be the theme. So I know from experience, sometimes I don't have as much opportunity to review the record of actions in advance as I'd like to. We can take a minute or two here and borrow from our bonus public comment time to just look through and see, is there anything? Plus it refreshes, even if we're not looking for errors, just to kind of refresh, okay, that's what we did last time, and that sets us up for now. And as you can see there, probably the most substantial portion was our talk about the youth-led community listening sessions, and a good amount of that is captured. I appreciate, have to imagine it was ORJ, either Monica or Dante, who helped document this for us. So thank you. Anyone seeing anything, additions, corrections?
Jeff, I just had one small thing, and it may not be a big deal. Monica, maybe you can let us know. I just want to make sure that the record indicated that Lynn indicated that I would be her representative on this subcommittee. So
that is good to add. Thank you. We should.
Yeah, definitely. And we will. So I think this is. Were you here at the last meeting, Marcus? Because I actually wasn't here at the last meeting.
Right.
So.
I was at the last meeting, so
I
that's
see.
why.
So, yeah, I will make that change then, and then yeah, so that we can update the online record.
Perfect. Thank you for adding that, Marcus. Any other points? All right, having not heard anything, I would then make a motion to approve the record of actions. Is there a second? I see Tammy with the 2. I almost feel like we're bidding you or something. I got, yeah.
Yeah,
I got the second. Thank you, Tammy. And then can we take a vote on, there's no further discussion on the item? So, and I think we need to do our roll call, right?
Yeah, I can do a roll call for the group.
Thank you,
Jeff
Monica.
Landau,
Aye.
Tammy Evelyn Kabadi,
Aye.
Marcus Walton,
Aye.
Edward Williams,
Aye.
Renell Ellis.
Aye.
Motion carries, approved unanimously.
Fantastic. Thanks, Monica. All right. So now we are at the point of our agenda, number 4, and that's going to be youth-led community listening sessions update. And there are exciting updates as I see them. And I'll also say this is the beginnings of the conversation. I know that it is always a sensitive component of, well, how far is this thing gone without my being brought into it, right? And I feel that this is really at the beginning of the concept phase, bringing to this space, and doesn't really move forward unless this group feels like there's an investment in an interest in it. So I'll just frame that in terms of bringing concepts and changes. But they're proposed concepts changes, right? So we'll think about them here, and if it's really going to happen, any of these modifications or other plans, it'll take investment from everybody. So we talked about having in the nearer term a youth-led community listening session, especially in response to having a community listening session previously that I think it was our discussion before, there wasn't as much youth turnout that we were hoping, even though we had great turnout. We had 100+ people and a lot of discussion, not as many youth voices as we had been hoping. So we were talking about doing this and a lot of interest here in having that happen. And then following that, when we had talked about it at our last subcommittee, we'll have a little breakout group that'll talk about how we can try to bring new plans and an update to this group now. So basically to do some work in between and come with an update. In that update meeting, which we did have, and I'm gonna try to look back at my notes because there was good documentation of this that Dante had helped put together. And I want to say that, yes, that was September 28th that we got together on a call and talked about, all right, what would this look like? And Isa, Kraus, and Chris was part of this call, and Dante and Monica, I believe. And so in this call, we're talking about the concept of what would this look like. Also, Steph Medley, who's also sitting on the subcommittee, and another RISE leader, basically someone who has experience with facilitating youth listening sessions, and also with Hayward Burns was Manuel LaFontaine. So that group, we were talking about what will this look like, and I think the general summary that I can give is that it seemed like it was a lot to take on in this short time. And I think we were hearing really that from the youth leader voice from Rise, plus others, but basically like kind of burnout concept, people feeling like there's just too much happening right now. And specifically some of youth at Rise leadership specifically, that would be one of the points that we would be going to in terms of leadership facilitation, are feeling like they're pulled in a lot of different directions right now. Plus, with that, the proposal that came during the meeting, and I think it's give credit to Issa, Kraus, the probation chief, of something more substantial concept. What if we had a not a one-off space or a preparation for this youth listening session, but something that would be a more bigger investment in a program that were a space like a youth advisory council, which could be something that's set up in the county that is a regular space, not a one-time youth listening session, but youth are sitting on the committee or the council or whatever that term ends up being, but that it's youth-led. It is a space for youth issues to be addressed, and it would be a sustaining thing. It would be an ongoing project, which I'll say excited me, and I was said that sounds cool. And I think at the meeting, to my memory, said to Steph Medley, who I trust has a lot more experience than I do in that, we already have something like this? Is there something like that? And she said there isn't. No. And was into it. And I think the general sense of the meeting was saying, well, that tentatively sounds really cool. That could be great, to be having a more, to my mind, progressive space for youth leadership. And because I think that's kind of part of the concern that we'd had in planning this youth listening session of what exactly are we hoping for and what is this going to be? And I think a lot of that can get addressed if it is truly a sustaining youth-led space, because then that can be determined the agenda by youth there. And it's also an idea, right? So this is not, we as not many, as a technical term, youth in that meeting were coming up with an idea, but clearly there need to be a lot of input from youth voices about, are you interested in this? Is this something you'd want to be involved in? What should that look like? So long summary, but that's kind of the modification. But my kind of then recap would be, I don't know if it's realistic that we're going to be able to do a youth listening session like we were talking about on this timeline, given pressure and demands for youth. Plus, maybe we can pivot to something a longer term, different space, bring it to the group and see what does the subcommittee think. So that's the update that I can give. Others that were on the call that want to chime in on this or kind of supplement?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying, basically, we brought some folks together. I had mentioned Manuel, who I work with, as well as Stephanie, because of her work with Rise, as well as Stephanie's colleague at Rise. And basically what we realized is there is a lot of intervening work that needs to go into having a youth-led session, right? And so while I want to be clear, at least in that meeting, we were not saying we don't want to have a session. We were saying it's going to take a lot of time. The elections are right around the corner. There are a lot of youth-led events leading up to and around the election that are going to be held. So we may not have as much participation from you to lead and facilitate a space. And we also are running, by the day, by the second, running out of time to invest in the youth in a way that's going to allow them to really facilitate, right? For us to spend time with them, do sessions with them so that they're ready, so that they understand what exactly we're trying to do, so that they're prepared. And so usually several weeks of that sort of prep would go into there being a youth facilitated session. Definitely worthwhile undertaking. I think something we're still interested in doing. We just realized that the timetable for that is going to be much longer than trying to do it next month like we had originally planned. And one of the things that kept coming up, I'd say particularly from our end, the Burns Institute end, was so we don't want to create a plan for a session and then say, hey, dear youth, please execute this, right? We want to include them in the process of what this should be, what it should look like, what they care about, and how they think they could most authentically sort of execute a plan to hear from youth about justice issues in the county. And so while we want to do that, and while we were talking about that, this idea came up that, you know, we've seen in a bunch of other places of what if we had a youth advisory council here? This is specifically, the way it was laid out was for the RJOB and the JJCC in particular. I'm sure it would also probably take on, if we can really get it up and running, it'll probably take on other functions and responsibilities as well, but definitely to help supplement decisions that are coming out of, or recommendations coming out of the RJOB and the JJCC, those two committees. What if there were a group of youth who are going to meet on their own to address, to discuss the things that we are recommending, and quite frankly, to be able to send those things back and say, hey, I think you need to think about X and Y and Z, or we have these questions, or we want to see these changes. And so that's an amazing idea. And so the facilitation of the youth-led session, we started to think of, like, what if the facilitation of that youth-led session is in service to the idea of the creation of this group, right? So what if that session is about, would you participate? What would you need to participate? How should that group look? How should it be? As opposed to trying to directly ask questions now about, what do you think of the youth justice system? What should it look like? Tackle all the big problems right away. How do we need to convene a body of youth that are going to have input on what justice looks like in Contra Costa County, as well as leadership opportunities, you know, within their own communities? And what does that need for you to be willing to participate in it? What does it need to be effective? What, you know, sort of dialogue and information do you want? And so in terms of maybe sometime early next year, that is tentatively an idea for what a youth-led listening session could still look like, is sort of serving that idea and having youth tell us, you know, what kind of body they want to see. You know, I imagine it would look a lot different than, you know, sort of what we've become used to in this structure. And, you know, how do we help facilitate what they actually want in a way that is actually engaging to them and that they actually want to participate in, so that we get the most out of hearing their voices and hopefully incorporating them that comes out of either body.
Thanks, Chris. Monica,
Yeah.
anything?
And yeah, since I was also at the meeting, I just want to kind of summarize the next steps for the, you know, the group that already met once that we mentioned. So essentially, Isa Iman Kraus will look into sharing one of her past RFP documents related to the development of the Youth Leadership Council, and ORJ can, you know, work with the chief to evaluate the availability of potential funds to support this effort, because we don't want it to be just, you know, like pure volunteer, no stipend, anything like that. We want to incentivize the, you know, the youth to participate. ORJ will review any documentation available on the idea in hopes of at least developing a potential project description that could be shared with the JJCC and RJOB subcommittee here for your endorsement. So, you know, we'll bring that back to you soon. And at the meantime, Stephanie and her staff at RISE will look to find some youth to participate in the next conversation, so that the youth members, whoever worked with them in the past, can join us in the next conversation dedicated to further talk about this idea of the leadership council. And the other thing that Isa mentioned was to also involve the foster youth population. We're currently not aware of an initiative in Contra Costa County that's dedicated for the foster youth population. So we want to explore if there is one or not. So we'll be in touch with the EHSD to see if there is one or not. Otherwise, we'll try to involve that population in this effort as well. So yeah, I think that's the next steps as far as that group.
Thanks, Monica. Maybe just to clarify on the point of the foster youth population, I think specifically the point that we've been coming up with was emancipated foster youth, and they're not being organization they're aware of locally that's serving, because I think there may be some that are to younger foster youth population, but specifically the kind of transitional age, I think maybe the coverage that we were meaning or needing to try to reach out to. But that is a really helpful coverage of kind of what we're proposing as next steps, and it was great seeing that in the chat. Nancy is going to be their point of contact for foster youth population. Yeah. CASA does mentoring with foster youth. I mentioned in the small group that I am a long-term CASA in San Francisco. So this is something that resonated with me. For sure, it does resonate with me. And that to one of the points that Monica was bringing up about having youth at the next space where there is planning or brainstorming, so to speak, that is consistent with what I was saying of how far is this going with my not being in the room about it. So bringing youth in at the very kind of beginning of the implementation concept, so that it's not something that's being delivered as this is what's happening, as much as inviting you to the space to be telling us what you would want this to look like. And if you're interested in it altogether. More feedback from after hearing from those that were kind of reporting on what happened at the meeting? What do y'all think?
So I actually think I'm happy to hear the report out. When I heard about the permanent space as a possibility, I think it's absolutely important because it provides a sense of belonging. And if you don't have that place of belonging, then, all the listening sessions kind of just becomes another point of hearing people talk. I know in the very beginning when I had joined this committee, that was one of the things that I had mentioned, that I hope that this body would not become just another group that's talking. And here we are now almost 2 years into this, and we're still having these conversations. And I know it takes time, but I think with youth in particular, their tolerance for this is very shortened. And so one, I just want to say great. There is that possibility of looking at a permanent space so they can create the environment that makes them feel comfortable. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention was that I'm really happy to hear about the foster care youth population, especially those who are emancipated, because these are young people that's then now put on the streets, or now they're expected to be adults, and their voice needs to definitely be heard. So I'm excited, even though I won't be a part of the committee going forward once my term is over in December. But I want to just encourage that with the youth, whenever we do have these listening sessions, that it does not become, again, this talking and then no action is then put in place. Because what I'm hearing from the youth, I have 2 young, my kids are in that population, and they are just at a place where enough talking. I can't say that enough. And now it's around, here's all this other feedback that has been there's a lot of feedback that's already out in society. Now it's about implementing and holding people accountable. And the last thing I want to say is that I think you mentioned it, Monica, about incentivizing when youth are coming, because wherever we really have, we put value, money, we put value on it. And so if we're not going to put some money around this, we really are saying that we don't value this next step. It just makes it sound good. So anyways, that's what I have to say. I know it's a lot of work that's happening with everything else that's going on, but we definitely have to start paying more attention to our youth. That's what I will add to the conversation.
Thank you, Tammy. Other feedback on any of this, on the concept? Yeah, Marcus?
Well, I just wanted to thank Tammy for her comments about moving forward and making sure that it's not a lot of talking. I am new to this body, so I guess my question is, what was the intent and goal of holding the youth community listening session? Is there a deadline for product, some sort of a goal for this body to push forward? You know, are there timelines that we need to meet and need youth feedback on? Because I'd rather have some level of youth feedback if there's something that we are responsible for pushing forward, instead of not getting it and still trying to push forward.
Yeah, good questions to know, just context of, you know, what's on our plate already, what are we supposed to be doing, and how does this relate to that? I think that the agenda packet, having at the very end of it, our work plan, which needs always updating and kind of consideration of new plans. So I think maybe Chris was framing it as a living document, and right, just the idea that this is going to change as needs and interest input from all of us have it.
I'm
But
good. How are
these
you?
are, a lot of this is what was set out, really taken from the initial phase. And that is to say that task force, and we have our slice of it, and these objectives. But you can see some of those completion dates have passed. I would say, yeah, all of them have passed at this point. So modifications needed for sure. And maybe to the point of, you know, where was this going initially, the concept of a youth listening session? I think that had been a good back and forth at previous meetings about, like, yeah, what is this exactly about, and different thoughts on that. To my mind, I had kind of seen it going into this little smaller work group thing as providing input on the capacity building goal that we have, which is the next item on our agenda. And I was kind of like, well, if we're really going to do a serious capacity building thing, we're going to have all this input on what it should look like. And we had a really robust turnout from community, but not a lot of youth turnout. So I think to have credibility, let's try to have something else. And then that morphed into, but right, that's kind of how I see the step of how we got to here, and then how it might fit into the bigger plans. Other thoughts, input?
Yeah, I would just say, I think in terms of timeline, I think the timelines were fairly self-imposed. Like there were things that came from the group wanting to, especially like Jeff said, in light of the listening session that was held, which I think was, you know, really well attended, and we heard from, you know, a lot of different voices. Just realizing that there wasn't a lot of youth voice, and saying we want to do that, and knowing we wanted to do it probably more certainly than we even knew what exactly to ask or what we wanted to hear, and trying to get that done as soon as possible so that we were not imbalanced, right, between the youth and adult populations and who we're hearing from. So I think you have time to modify, you know, the expectations here based on the information, and especially based on an opportunity to build out something, a space specifically for you to have input on a regular basis, which is something I think I'm guessing. Well, I know the RJOB we've talked about, right? Like there isn't youth voice in the body itself. I think the JJCC may have some youth designees or something like that. I remember hearing. But, you know, I think that's, you know, a worthwhile enough goal to take a few months and try to make sure it gets off the ground, and then to regroup.
And Chris is reminding me about, you know, how absent youth was, so to speak, or how much we were missing in the last community listening session, because I would say almost 9 out of 10 comments were about proposal related to the ranch, which is related to youth and that whole system. So we weren't hearing a lot of youth voices, as many as adult voices that were talking about, right, what that looks like. And but all the more reason.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, was there a targeted effort to get youth involved? I mean, what did we do around making sure or assuring that there was representation from any segment, you know, any segment of that population? Did we, you know, go out and make sure we outreached in certain places to make sure that we got that representation, or did we just put it out to the community as a whole and hoping that we would get something like that too, is what I was wondering.
Right, good question. So that we're not doing the same thing again and expecting a different result, like what exactly happened before. My sense is that that there is room for growth there, and that it likely was kind of each of us sending out to our networks, but not having it as kind of specific designated that way, and making sure that we were hitting our youth leadership organization allies. So I maybe, Monica, you have a better sense from ORJ of where things were disseminated. I mean, other than just knowing that it went out to a kind of broad network of the county altogether.
Yes, so definitely went out to a broad network of county, you know, community-based CBOs, and we did make sure to include youth serving CBOs with the hope that they help turn out youth. However, I think it could either be the timing of the meeting that didn't really work out for the youth with their, you know, online learning these days, or anything else, or it was just not really as big of a focus on youth. So that's why we're just doing like a general listening session. So maybe the youth serving agencies didn't realize that they should really turn out youth. So I think there could be some lack of emphasis on the importance of including the youth. So we'll definitely make sure to include that. And during a meeting with Arise last week or so, they do have some youth leaders that have been working with them, that have been actively participating. However, you know, now towards the end of the year, many of them are seniors in high school and they're applying for colleges, so their availability could be limited anyway, just for the remainder of this year. So, which is also one of the reasons why Rise recommended that we don't rush into another youth listening session without actual youth participation. So we were just kind of trying to take a break. Let's really, you know, rethink about this and let the youth take control. Let them, like, we can gather them when they're available to do so, and they can discuss what they want to, you know, really focus on and what questions they want to raise among themselves. So they're taking the lead rather than, you know, us adults telling them when and where to do what. So that's why we're trying to take a pause from the original plan for the youth listening session towards, you know, before the end of the year. And definitely it takes time to plan for anything like that anyway. We want to make sure we have a youth council in charge of everything, with kind of some guidance from, you know, the adults, but not necessarily telling them what to do.
Exactly.
Monica, I have a quick question. I recall when we first formed as a committee, we were able to meet in person at that time. there were at least, if my memory serves me correctly, there was at least 2, if not 3, people that were on the committee that were, in that younger age range, and who had been involved in, I guess, the youth detention center or something of that nature. But I haven't seen them prior to us, prior to 2020, when we met a few times. And I'm just curious, are they still on this committee? And if so, have they had any feedback regarding what it is that they are needing, since they are in that younger population that we're trying to serve?
Feel free to jump in, Jeff, but my understanding is we don't really have a youth member on our job. I know the county's Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, the JJCC, has actual youth members. But I remember that I think Shayla Bonner and LaDamian Flowers on RJOB were sort of designated as the representatives for that kind of a young adult population. That's my recollection. Shayla is still under our job, but LaDamian resigned, and Renelle joined us after LaDamian resigned. So that's like my best recollection. We don't really have people specifically in that age range.
Yeah, that's consistent with my memory too. And I think Shayla's diversion group in the subcommittee, I mean to say.
Shayla actually signed up for the data subcommittee.
She's on data. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Consider myself to be pretty youthful.
Yeah, all right. Well, excellent. We need those spaces in here. Yes, and Steph Medley is true, is very on the pulse of the youth advocate.
Yeah, and also like Jill said in the chat box, Stephanie Medley definitely representing a youth serving agency, so it's a very strong youth voice.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Or to Monica. I wanted to add that Stephanie had also specifically mentioned APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, as another potential source for leadership, so that we're not just going always to our same sources, while we have to also respect and try to work with our known resources. And RISE did really have a lot of expertise in the area. I'm looking back at my notes and seeing it was Daisy was the other leader from RISE who was giving us some background info. But APEN had come also to mind, and I was thinking since the meeting that CJA, which is California Immigrant Youth Justice Alliance, has been involved in some local Contra Costa specific advocacy, and I could see that they might be interested in engaging. So trying to think of, to your point, Ronell, if there are different youth leadership spaces, youth outreach spaces that we're aware of, to really have intentional outreach there if we want to have turnout that we're hoping for, and engagement that we can't just put it out in a general, and really have to be thoughtful about who are we reaching out to, see if we want folks to come.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think we went through this discussion before, either at this body or at the preparation meeting we had between meetings. We can try to turn out youth at these listening sessions. However, these listening sessions may not be the best, place and, like kind of format for youth participation. Some of them could just, not really want public speaking or speaking in front of, a lot of people, adults or youth. So that's why we want the council to kind of figure out what's the best way, to engage them, not necessarily limiting to the setup of a listening session.
Just giving that pause for comment feedback. I'll just orient on our time also for the meeting. We're scheduled to go until 5. And I had anticipated that the bulk of our work would be this section and the section that's coming up, which would be talking about capacity fund, community capacity building. Just seeing the note in the chat from Jill about health, housing, homelessness, health, H3, which provides basic homeless support services as being another source for our outreach for foster youth specifically. Thank you, Jill, that's helpful. So, right, I would say that I had sort of imagined this conversation to go roughly to 4:15, and that 4:15 until 4:45 or so to talk about capacity fund, and that would budget just the remainder time to whatever else we needed in terms of closeout. So I guess the thought would be, or the thought I'm having here would, not necessarily that we're voting on as much as just getting a sense from this group about interest, sort of a temperature check, I guess is what I'm thinking, because I don't know if there's a specific deliverable that has to happen here as much as we're interested in moving forward in this. There would also be the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, the JJCC, would have, I think, some sort of similar subcommittee check-in and say, is this something that we're interested in doing? And that we would then have, following this meeting, another small work group that would include youth leaders for follow-up planning. But kind of before we do any of that, make sure that it's consistent with what this subcommittee feels like makes sense, and that it's how we should move forward. People feeling good about this work plan? Kind of, or at least next steps? All right. Want to make sure I'm on solid ground if I go to that. Perfect. Get seeing those thumbs up. Great. When I go to the next work group meeting saying, yeah, I checked in with the group. It seems like people are interested in moving forward on this, and let's see where it goes. Okay, great. And then, of course, I'll give a little bit more detail than that and incorporate some of the specific feedback that we've had here at this meeting. Great. So that gives us the opportunity to move to the next item on the agenda. And hey, we don't need to stretch this thing out unnecessarily. So if we get done before 5, then so be it. But at least we're allowing ourselves, I see that thumbs up also from Tammy, that we give ourselves the time that we need, and we're moving along here. Is that Stephanie?
Yep, it's me.
Hey, Steph. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Welcome. I know you had a conflict meeting.
Yes, but I'm here.
That's right, showing your commitment, because, right, you could still be at that meeting, but you chose to come here, which I appreciate. So yeah, we were just at the point of agenda where we were sort of wrapping up our conversation about having Youth Advisory Council, and the youth listening session kind of pivot, I suppose, following our conversation. Was just reporting on that to everybody, and I think we just wrapped up in that saying, we're interested in this. This sounds worthwhile. And let's move ahead with another small work group that would include youth leaders to explore it further. So just kind of got the approval from this group to move forward without having a formal vote. That said, your name was referenced a number of times as expert in this area. So just want to give you the opportunity before we do transition to the capacity fund, if there are points that you want to chime in or add, given your area of expertise.
No, I don't think so.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I'm sure you all had a robust conversation. I think I've already said, even at our last meeting, said what I need to say.
Great. Well, it's moving along, so that is good and exciting. And I know it'll be interesting as well to hear the updates of your most recent meeting. But not putting you on the spot in this moment. And let's transition then to, this will be item 5 on our agenda. And that is bringing us to the work plan. And right, if you have the agenda packet there, that's 14 of 17. And we're really zooming in on the capacity fund component, which is last page. So that's easy to find, right? Just scroll all the way to the end and you'll see this is attachment 4, page 17 to 17. I'll just read this aloud to you, which is establish a community capacity fund to build the capacity of CBOs, which is community-based organizations, especially those staffed by formerly incarcerated individuals, to contract with the county and provide services to reentry clients. And then continuing on, the RJOB, it's us, shall collaborate with the CCPEC, which is the Community Corrections Partnership Executive Committee, who sort of, I would say, is supervising group of stakeholders related to realignment funds. So those are local dollars that come to the county related to justice systems, more or less, is my summary. Well, welcome any corrections. But that pot of money to consider increasing realignment funding for community services. So another way of saying that last part is, let's work with the folks that administer those realignment dollars to see if more of them can go to community-based organizations. We saw that as priority. We continue to see that as a priority issue. And we're following up on our conversations from last time, which included a request to Office of Reentry and Justice, which has been met, and then some. Appreciate this. Said specifically, I think, to Dante in that conversation, or we just said generally to ORJ, would be really helpful if we had some models to know, like, how does this work? Because we said we're interested in expanding this thing, having something happen. Let's try to, and maybe just to make a little bit more explicit, the capacity fund concept of building the ability of investing in existing networks and those communities that could have this like an organizational structure, but basically need some technical assistance to do that, or basically already have the structure, but need some assistance to get the grant funding so that they're better positioned to be able to provide the services, and that there is an alternative to your regular custody or law enforcement orientation, and instead there could be something robust as an alternative in community, and that would require something like this capacity building. Dante did put together a report for us, which is terrific, and it gives us the ability to move forward on our intention from last time, which was, sounds great, but how do we do that? Kind of, Tammy, to your point, where's this going, right? Like, we're talking about it. And I have to say, I'm excited about the Youth Advisory Council. I feel like that's a tangible thing. It's a real thing, not just a, like a, right, we wrote a report or we had a one-day session, but something more substantial, could be long-term. And this thing too, we're moving from, that sounds like something we recommend, to, well, what does it look like in different places? Dante had a conflict also this afternoon, and for that reason could not be here right now. I talked with him individually just before our meeting to make sure that I had as good a handle as I could have on the content from the report to kind of digest it. And so this is starting at page 9 of 17 of your agenda packet. And it's right, it's a subcommittee report, and it's from Dante, and it's dated today. And It sets out the background with this. I was saying it about the record of actions, and perhaps I'm the only one that's in this position, but sometimes I don't have as much lead time as I would like to read through the record of actions. And also sometimes I don't have as much time as I'd like to read the attachments to my agenda packets. So I'll just assume that maybe not everyone has read all of this in detail, because we all have a lot on our plates. So just to kind of go through some of it, and respecting those that did prepare in advance to read all of it, and I know that can also be in this other situation. But Dante goes into some depth about the background of why this is an issue, and right, if we set up a perpetuating system where it is really hard to understand what the requirements are. The requirements are not really designed for community-based organizations to get the funding. They don't get the funding, they're further back behind. Now it's just like this cycle of not providing access. And on the other hand, if you are really having engagement with community-based orgs and saying, what do you guys need? And they're saying, well, we need to understand how this stuff works, or we need the grants to be written in a way that actually is going to make it accessible. And you need to have prioritization of these certain factors, like awareness, experience with certain communities, if you're build that into the grant. So all of that is kind of this concept of having a shift in how the process works, because as it is, some of it is there's not enough money to go around, right? And some of it is the way that the money's getting doled out is also restricting who gets it. So if we can add to the pie and also make sure that it's getting distributed in the fairest of ways and going to those that can really provide the services without kind of having someone else come into a community and try to establish relationships when it's like, it's already here. You just need to make sure that we can have our services, which are essential and are already working really well, that it's on your radar, grant, like, you know, grant provider, and that we can tie those together. And that's a complicated process of how you can really have that improved dynamic, and it's not just money going out without the needed investment in time to make sure that it really sticks and works. Right, because I think that can also be part of the feedback. I know that it has been part of sometimes the budget Jedi sessions, which is what we've called through the Racial Justice Coalition, and kind of these trainings, some folks feeling really frustrated of money going to orgs in community and feeling like this is getting wasted. We should be having it in another place. There needs to be accountability for things, which is also true. And capacity building, I think, can be a positive feedback loop for that. So then just moving along in this report, and it would, of course, be nice to have another voice than one person talking all the time, but that's my way of apologizing for doing so much talking. But I am walking through this subcommittee report that there are different models, and I think that's kind of the next step in this that I would jump to, which would be, if I'm at page 11 of 17, community capacity funds. I know I've jumped quite a bit there, but I'm kind of allowing folks to read through the detail individually, having given a really quick summary there of those pages before. That there are different ways that this can be working out. One of them is a pool-based fund. And Dante had identified specifically the Richmond Community Foundation, has a link there, as well as Community Foundation capacity building grants. So you can see those as examples, and I'll just read this short paragraph. The most traditional form is a pool-based fund where the funder allocates a specific amount of money to the capacity building effort, outlines who may be available for this funding, and usually caps the grants that can be made from this pooled fund. So it seems like, right, it's a big set aside pot of money, and it's kind of saying this is who can apply, and doesn't have much more of a structure than that, in the sense of, well, this isn't setting out to set out program, for example, and it doesn't have the same sort of learning community concept that is coming in the section that's below. But as Dante was filling out some more details for me, as someone who doesn't know that much about these different models, he was saying that's probably the most common. And he says most traditional there, but that you see a lot of examples of that. How are people doing in just energy focus wise? I'm remembering my closing argument, opening statement, trainings, and they're like, you have 2 minutes, they're gone. No one's following anymore. But it's a different space here. So, okay, check in, we're here. Great. So the next thing is cohort-based, which is that learning community concept, that it is, there's money that's there, but it's also a concept of not necessarily individuals. I was saying that Dante is like, does this mean that it's always the same people? Like they're kind of in a graduate class or something? Not exactly necessarily, because you could have different organizations that are there, and then like one of these really makes more sense for their financial person. One of these really makes more sense for their whatever, outreach person, something like that. But the idea being that there is a little bit more structure than a pot of money that has specific requirements for it. But this would be mixed expectation that you participate in these various forms of technical assistance training, and that's part of the process. And I mean, I'll confess that I don't have that much background knowledge of how these work, as much as I'm learning with you, is a way of saying it, or I'm learning and maybe some of you already know this. But definitely we know Alameda County is, it seems to me, a attainable or like the most obvious place to look, in the sense of, okay, it's next door, and also we have a thought partner in this with Isa Emmon-Krause, who's expressed similar interest in having some sort of capacity building effort. And we know that this is an Alameda model that's there, which doesn't mean we need to do that, but it's kind of like, how would we do that? And is that really doable? It's right next door. Plus we know someone who was involved in that. So that's quick shorthand for my thoughts on this. And then Dante also suggested, while it's not outlined here, like sort of a third hybrid kind of concept of, all right, there is the pool-based, less structure, the cohort-based learning community thing. And then there can also be maybe this hybrid concept, and he had put out there in the conversation, there is, let's see, something called Strong East Contra Costa County Emerging Leaders. So maybe you're familiar with this. I wasn't before, but it's kind of the idea of different funders coming together, perhaps around a particular subject concept, and that there would be some sort of learning community, but also it's a pool of different funders, and also it's a little bit more specific on a campaign like technical assistance and capacity building, but related to let's end the school to prison pipeline. Let's something on that kind of targeted concept, or focused, I should say. All right, so that's my overview of this report, I guess I'd say, is that capacity funds are addressing this cyclical problem of those who have local expertise not receiving the money. So this would be addressed, the capacity fund model would be, or investment in that would be trying to address that or change it, disrupt that. And there are different ways that this can happen. We have a couple models there, or maybe a few. What do folks think about all this? Such a general question. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you think? Objection, vague. Turn off that other no. Yeah.
So I'll just flag a few things to kind of start the conversation. First and foremost, I think this is an opportunity, or this is one of many, to potentially work with the diversion subcommittee, who is working to identify gaps, within the diversion program offering. And I'll tell you just, preliminarily, based on what we see in the diversion subcommittee, there's not enough, there doesn't seem to be enough, community-based organizations that can really house the programs and sort of run them. There's a lot of go to the police department for their Saturday morning program, or go to the whatever. And so that's not to say that those things don't exist. It's to say that as far as, what we've seen, we haven't seen a ton of it. Obviously we see Rise, doing a lot in terms of program offerings, but I know there have to be more community-based organizations out there that are probably already doing these things and we just aren't aware. B, some of them may just be really small and informal. They may not necessarily be even, say, a 501c3 at the moment, right? Or C, they may be able to do this type of programming, but may currently be focused on something different and may possibly be open to or susceptible to pivoting, given the right sort of opportunity to do that or to think about it. That all makes me think that at least at first blush, looking at this, either the cohort or hybrid models might be best. I don't know as much about the hybrid, but the cohort model being that we're going to provide funding or resources, but also, there's going to be this learning community and maybe a series of trainings or whatever the case is, right, to actually create opportunities for, if it's small organizations that maybe need a pass-through 501c3 to get the funds to them, right? Like, you have more of an opportunity to really build as opposed to, looking for nonprofits that already exist to do this with. It seems in a cohort situation where they have the opportunity to get a little bit more support. So just throwing it out there.
Thank you, Chris.
I was going to chime in there too. Yeah, as far as the CBOs and community-based organizations, the diversion program, and speaking on diversion as well, we just eliminated a program that was already in place with Coco Lead over at Health Right 360, which we were really unfortunate to lose, which was a city-based program here in Antioch that provided the housing piece, the case management, the wraparound, the mental health, and all of those components combined. And so that went away. So, yeah, you're right. There are some of us out here who do have some diversion options. However, we just lost one whole program, and I think we were staffed about between 12 and 14 people staffing that program. So it was pretty significant. But in place of that, even though that did occur, our manager, Patrice Guillory, who is pretty effective in bringing things to the forefront, we're always trying to evolve as an agency as well. We do have some far-reaching resources as a broader agency here locally. Yeah, we're kind of close knit and kind of small, but we do have other options, and things of that nature. So we try to make sure that we expand our thinking and our production on what we're already doing. we're really supposed to be just here helping folks getting out of incarceration. We're only supposed to be focused on AB 109 individuals, but we do regular supervision. We do a broader probation. We do court probated folks. We do folks who just been in jail. We have a long tier that we go through. Folks just been in jail 30 days within the last 3 years. So we broaden our spectrum, but also we try to find ways to, compound services. And we don't just say, oh, okay, this is what we instructed to do, or this is what we only funded to do. How can we squeeze in anything else that may be helpful to, our participants with just finding more things to do or needs that they have that need to be met, and how can we meet them even under our already, tight budgets and things of that nature, but still implement them somehow, some way. So in speaking on that, on the reentry piece, which is what we're, really, really highly focused in doing, I believe that if this is what we want to do, we're on board with that, in broadening the spectrum and building on what we've already established here in the county between Central and East. The Success Center does the West County, but we do Central to East, and so that's what we're doing every day, trying to figure out how can we maximize production and produce more and more resources for our individuals who are formerly incarcerated and their families as well, because our families are impacted just as well as the individuals impacted by the system. The families are too, and we were speaking on the youth. It would be also, this is another piece that we try to get involved, is the kids of our participants, right? So those are our youth as well. Sometimes we forget about them because we're focused on the person that we're serving, but their children are children of the community as well as children of the incarcerated. And it has, great, it has, it just has great value when we focus on those children too. So that's another youth base that we could tap into just in my own thinking. Some of the kids that's already have parents who are just as involved as well. So, but yeah, trying to figure that out, and other CBOs that we collaborate with, because as the network, we're also charged to train other agencies, right? So we do trainings within agencies as well. And, obviously COVID has, minimized some of that, but that's what we do. And we look forward to anything that we can do, capacity building, especially when you're bringing in more funding. That's always helpful too. But yeah, just so you guys know that we are doing those things. And, Christopher, you're right. There's agencies out here already has that on your mind and on their agenda, and implementing those things as well.
Thanks, Ronell. Yeah, I know losing Lead Plus was definitely a major hit, and I was on the advisory board for that. A lot more to be said on it, but to all the things you were saying, appreciate that feedback. Steph, you were about to speak.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm thinking about is not being, I think we need some structure, but don't need to overstructure things. So I think having some type of hybrid between the pool and then kind of creating this learning community is beneficial. I'm also thinking about, because when you're thinking about those CBOs that may be smaller and maybe need a little bit more flexibility and funding as well, thinking about how can we create it where it's more like for general operating, still having that, these are some of the specific things around like reentry or whatever that we want, but creating it so that it's general operating so that they can have flexibility in how they're using those. And also creating a way for them to build their capacity, but not being so prescriptive where they can identify what those needs are. I think it's really important that we create an opportunity, and it could be thinking about, I mean, I think we have an opportunity to be as creative as possible. What would it look like if we could have, I don't even know what to call it, but like an organizational coach for folks that are able to get these funds to help them think through how they build the capacity of their organizations. And
Consultant
what
or
are some of
whatever,
those, how they would be able to use, or what they need to be able to use those funds for. So I think there's ways we could be very creative and have structure, but not be restrictive with these funds.
Yeah.
And I would just
Thank you,
add
Tammy.
the last thing I would say about it, in addition to all of the feedback that you just got, is so it looks like a couple of the models that we have in the staffing report flag evidence-based practices, and I just want to highlight for you really quickly the conversation that we've had in the diversion subcommittee about that and how that could be exclusionary in terms of what it calls for, right? And a lot of times your local area, grassroots built CBOs are not necessarily going to rise to the level of that. Doesn't mean that what they're doing doesn't work. Doesn't mean that what they're doing is not data driven to some degree, but it may not rise to the level of an evidence-based practice, which has been published about in a scholarly article and all of this other stuff. And so making sure that you think about and are very intentional about sort of how this is structured in terms of eligibility, so that you're not screening out the very people that you want to include and build capacity with.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think that this is shaping moving forward. I feel like specifically the concepts that we're talking of, how much support, how much restriction, openness. Right, there's a lot of room with creativity, especially if I'm looking at the, what is this, page 12 of 17. I'm not saying that we would get exactly Alameda County dollars, but round 2 of phase 1 saw 42 grant applicants awarded a total of $210,000. During phase 2, the project for implementation, Alameda County awarded a total of 53 projects for grants totaling $7,272,111. In August 2018, dedicated total of $8,750,000 to investments related to capacity fund. Well, yeah, we could definitely provide significant support to 53 projects with 7 million plus. Now, they have 1.6 million people in Alameda County and we only have 1.1. So I'm just saying proportional dollars would be appropriate. I know, getting a little greedy here, but I'm just thinking like, okay, in terms of ambition, and when we do talk big ask, if we're thinking big with this, well, where does that come from? You're talking millions of dollars. And we're saying, well, we're talking less than what Alameda County has neighboring. So that's always sometimes my coalition hat on, is like, we need to ask for more, right? Because we never get what we do ask for, and then it will get towards something that is closer to equity. But longer way of saying that this could be, we could think big with this in terms of the amount and the type of robust investment. And apparently the initial phases there showed enough return, and it made enough sense that they really intensified the effort, the investment. So it's a model there.
Can I just, this conversation is reminiscent of the JJCC subcommittee conversation from week before last, I believe, last week actually.
Okay.
And so I think that there's going to be some crossover in the work, and I again, I'm new and looking at this from the eyes of someone who's not, who has not done all of their homework. I'm slowly but surely doing more of it. And I guess my question would be, how much of the work is, how much are we coordinating with the JJCC on some of this work? Especially when we start talking about setting up, and maybe this is even a larger conversation, but setting up structures so that community-based organizations that don't have the evidence-based practices yet, but are effective or have the support of communities, can still access not only these funds but other resources as well. And so we're having these conversations, and I just want to make sure that these conversations are percolating up to a larger body, to a larger group, so that everyone's sort of on the same page, and we're not looking at this just from the RJOB and this subcommittee, or the JJCC and that subcommittee, but maybe we should be looking at it countywide for a variety of county services. I know that's not our mission, that's not our task, but it seems like if we're hearing these conversations over and over, I want to make sure that those conversations are getting up to the level where maybe it's a countywide conversation instead of just at this level.
Definitely. Those are good points. And thank you, Marcus. I would say to that I don't want to be overly confident, but I know that there are significant efforts to have communication between what we're doing here and JJCC, so that that there aren't competing plans or efforts, and that there's fighting over what it would be, and really coordinating. Jill, who's on the call, did her part, I guess, about 2 meetings ago, in encouraging me specifically to reach out to Issa and Kraus about, you guys are talking community capacity fund. They're having a similar conversation in JJCC. You guys should really talk. We did talk about that and said, yeah, we're both interested in this. Let's have our kind of parallel paths building on this as it shapes up. And then also just to say that I feel Office of Reentry and Justice is sort of like natural communication path between us and JJCC, and that, if nothing else, probation is a significant voice in JJCC, and ORJ is now aligned inside of probation, or falls within probation. So I think that also helps facilitate through Monica and Dante specifically being able to communicate what's happening here to JJCC. I hope I'm not assuming too much with that, but I feel like ORJ kind of does fill that role. Monica, do you think that's right? Is that fair?
Yes. So ORJ will definitely try to do all of that coordination. We'll try to attend, since we are like mostly in charge of facilitating the meetings at our job. We do have other staff at probation that's more focused on the work of the JJCC. So I will discuss with Dante, because ORJ is sort of at capacity right now as far as how many meetings we can actually participate in, how many bodies we can actually monitor. And we got a really full plate as far as that, with a lot of subcommittees going on for the CAB and our job. So I'll discuss with Dante to see what's the best way of keeping that flow of information between the JJCC and our job, and how best to make sure we coordinate and we're not duplicating efforts, and how most efficiently work together. So definitely, we can report back on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Monica.
I think, your points are spot on, Marcus. I think some of those those conversations have started up. And I think specifically with the JJCC versus our job, JJCC is looking at specific money too, and specifically for what's going on with young people. I think there's a way, especially when we start looking at this community capacity funding, how do we use that money to maybe bolster some of the funds for JJCC, and then what goes towards adult services, since that's the focus for our job as well. I don't know why I can't talk. I think I'm tired. I've been on meetings all day.
You got this.
So I definitely agree with you. Like, we need to have more conversations and stay coordinated in all of our efforts. And I think now it's starting to happen, I guess, because I've been on a couple of those meetings too. So we're starting to get things coordinated.
Yeah. It is good to be bringing this up and making sure that the conversation is happening in these different spaces.
Can we point out Jill's comment in the chat about the agenda next week?
Yes.
JJCC agenda.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah.
So Jill, thanks. Please.
So yeah, so I just got the agenda. It's a 3-hour meeting. It's gonna, one of the subjects is that youth council, but it's also going to discuss, they have to make a great number of changes because of the change at the state level with the youth justice initiatives that are happening. So it's a really good way to just kind of keep your finger on the pulse. I know there's a lot of cross-pollination because I know Stephanie is just about in almost every meeting I'm in, and I see Monica, hi Monica again today, and I see Jeff. So I think there's lots of cross-pollination. Isa and her staff are also in many, many places now and very active. So I think it's really good to just keep your finger on the pulse and recognize that our county is collaborating in greater ways now than I think ever before.
That's something that I see on the positive for sure. Edward, I saw you unmuted for a second. I'll invite you to speak if you want. I just saw that you had unmuted.
Yeah, I was cut off there for a few minutes. No, I'm enjoying the conversation, especially the part about the youth. I'm going to make a statement here about African American youth. And I'm 79 years old, and I've been in prison, in and out of prison for many, many years. I just did 30 years. And I have a lot to say about youth. I'm a great-grandfather. I have children. And I notice young African Americans are having a tough time just getting along and respecting each other. And I noticed when I grew up, the family was intact. I had a father, and mostly everybody that I knew in my age range had a father. But I noticed after my generation, the father leading the family or being in the household had started to decline. And now over half of the African American youth are being raised by grandmother, big sister, mother. And every time I bring this up, I receive a lot of negative comments from women because they think that I'm putting them down, and that's not the case. I have the utmost respect for women. But the African American youth are being raised by women. This right here is some of the problem. It's not 100%, but it's a large percentage of the problem. Because an African American woman cannot raise an African American male to receive the things that the male should receive in growing up that he would receive if a man was there. I mean, she can give him shelter, food, clothing, and shelter. She can give him all of that, but I'm talking about a mental thing that he would receive from the male presence. And so, yes, I definitely want to be involved in speaking to the youth, because I'm listening to them. I'm interacting with them. I have cousins. I have some families that have 10 children. That's my relatives. And I noticed they use the N word like it's a part of the regular vocabulary. And not realizing that's the most disgusting word in the whole, in the 800,000 words in the English language. So, yes, I got something to say when you start talking about youth. So thank you.
Always appreciate your contributions, Edward. And yeah, glad that you were part of the conversation.
Okay.
Definitely. And perhaps as we have heard your voice, I'm remembering, I don't know if we've yet, I don't want to put you on the spot, Meg Keeley, but just sometimes an encouragement to take the mic for a moment if you do want to say something on this or something else, as we're nearing the end of our time. We have about another 10 minutes still scheduled. So if there was something you'd hope to contribute.
No, I don't want you to think I'm just sitting here eavesdropping. I'm on a committee with the Interfaith Council that's looking into developing a mentoring program for youth. And we're looking to work with CASA and possibly some other organizations in the community. So we're very attuned to both ideas from both of these committees in terms of working with youth, adjudicated youth, and juvenile justice. So anyway, that's my interest and that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Meg. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I'm glad you're here with us.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on that. What he was just saying is that I'm kind of like a dinosaur anyway, so I'm probably not the best person to really chime in on certain subjects. But even when we were talking about or discussing earlier the evidence-based practices, right? And coming from a different era of treatment and rehabilitation, there wasn't always evidence-based, but it was effective, and it was projection, right? So me talking about whatever someone needs to do is really what I'm telling myself, right? So I'm a formerly incarcerated ex-convict and things of that nature. So when I'm talking or when I'm analyzing, I'm not always looking at it from my lens personally, but I'm incorporating that. And so I think there's a lot of different aspects of what we do, in the whole grand scheme of, trying to turn the system around or upside down, that I think we've gotten away from some basics because we have some new buzzwords like evidence-based. But just like with substance abuse treatment, right? When we went to a Medi-Cal funded system, you can only hire counselors who've gone to AOD certified or schooling. right? And so it eliminated a lot of people who were in treatment, who turned their lives around, didn't have that certificate or whatever. But some people win degrees, and they don't even acknowledge a whole 4-year bachelor's degree for a certificate program, and the person already went through the AOD program themselves. But things like that, where they used to hire us. I mean, I've been in this for since '84. And I've been with Health Right 360, basically Walden House, since that time. I came into substance abuse treatment as a 16-year-old from juvenile and California Youth Authority, and I started that process back in '84 with the crack cocaine epidemic. I'm really on also chiming in and in line with my brother was saying on the phone about the absence of the father too. My father was absent. Here, I got my life in order and checked my addiction. I became a father who was in the home, and all my kids have a college degree. So it speaking to that, that's almost like I would consider that evidence-based, right? I didn't have a father. I didn't get a college degree. Later in my life, I got one because I turned my life around. But all of my kids who had me in the home, they got a college degree. So but we don't always look to that enough anymore about we getting into I don't know. It just seems like everything has to be formal or formalized, and you're not getting any of the intangibles that sometimes people bring to the table who've lived it, right? So we're not getting that experience from actually truly living it. If I go get taught about it, then I'm considered, and I have a bachelor's degree, which is not much, but I'm just saying I went and did that too. I got it in criminology, but I got my original criminology from being a criminal, right? But I still think that has value and has weight when weighing in on subjects that pertain to those who have committed crimes, right? I won't say criminals anymore, but I'll say people who commit crimes, because we all do commit crimes for different reasons. But that's always been something that kind of stimulates my activity going the other way is when we get involved in that, and they're not really pulling in some folks who can be very helpful to all of these topics, and they're getting left out. Because anywhere else, if we talk about legal matters, you bring in a lawyer. If you're talking about medical matters, you bring in a doctor. When you talk about criminal matters, you never bring in criminals, right? Or like I say, folks who've committed crimes. So I just wanted to say that and just kind of like make sure that that's out there, because the evidence-based piece, I'm still trying to figure that out, along with harm reduction. Let me tell you, being an addict, if I could just harm reduce and get loaded 3 days a week, that would probably be a little better. I might be able to function a little bit more. But the issue is I don't have that ability to manage an addiction comfortably for a couple of days a week, right? So things like that, I'm just like, I'm an abstinence person. I can do better if I don't get loaded at all, right? Now my chances of being harmed are extremely reduced, right? Because I'm not doing anything. And you can't tell the police, part of that too is you can't tell the police, hey man, I'm doing great. I get loaded on Thursdays and Fridays. I used to get loaded every day. If I got dope in my, I'm going to jail. There is no, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So it's kind of like mixed messages coming from different areas, I don't know, just speaking on that. But some of those things I think conflict. And so we have to be, when we talk about being organizations or we talking about being a county, and this is one of the only counties that I'm familiar with that runs the AOD, right? Usually that's outsourced. So when you have a county that runs it, then they have to have certain things in place. But I just think it's a little unique. And so it's just something to think about, that if we always go with something that we call evidence-based, I don't know if that's something that, you know, if we leave everything out, all the other elements out, we could be shortchanging, you know, our overall view of what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Ronell.
Right. I agree
Yeah,
with
Edward,
you 1,000,000%. No, I agree with him 100%, 1,000,000%. You know, no, I don't have a college degree from a university, but I got a PhD from the streets, and that's what we're dealing with. You know, the youth are out here in the streets, and like the brother was just saying, if you're going to deal with these people, you got to get somebody that understand their walk, that understand the trail, the path that they're on, understand their history. And we know history is best qualified to reward our research. Somebody that knows what they are going through because they have already been through it. Now that person right there, whether it's male or whether it's female, that's the person should be talking to these youth. And that's where I'm coming from. But I also want everybody to understand that I've been in prison for 30 years. I've been out a few years. And I'm out here struggling and hustling, but everything is legal now. Everything is legal. And I'm constantly observing the community, and it has changed in 30 years, 30-something years. It has really changed, and my grandchildren are out here now, and they see things totally different, and they don't see that male. They don't see that older male, that older female. They don't see them as, oh, they deserve respect, because they didn't grow up like that, like I did. I would yield over to the older people, male or female. I would try to help them, not harm them or take from them. But the youth today, they see things totally different. In some kind of way, people like the guy that just got through talking and myself, some kind of way we got to get their attention. That's the only way we're going to make some progress. We got to get their attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. And thank you, Ronell. There's no substitute for life experience. We're getting to some real stuff on this call, which I always welcome. Right, I have more confidence about our direction when I'm hearing from voices like yours, Edward, that saying that this is worthwhile, these endeavors. Makes me feel like then we're grounded, we know why we're doing what we're doing. We're at the end of our time. I will say that my thought is we'll meet the same as we normally do, the second Thursday of the upcoming month. It's just really nice to hear people's voices in a little bit more extended format for a little bit. It depends on sometimes the size of the room, but it's making me think like, you know, we should have a little something incorporated. It's something I do with my choir, that we have like, okay, spotlight on somebody, tell me why did you come to this space, right? And you like 2 minutes to talk about it. So I think maybe we'll do that. I'll tap someone at this up and be like, why did you decide to join us and to do this? Yes, Meg, we can make sure that somehow I'm going to just add your email to my list, and I'll make sure that you can get connected. So thank you, everyone. I really respect and appreciate your participation and contributions here, and hope that we'll be in contact in between, before the next meeting, and at least to see each other at the next meeting. So be well, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Enjoy.